what exactly performance marketing is. Right.
What performance marketing does differently is
Mhm.
all sort of ads and campaigns which are run to get revenue. So, for example, if you're scrolling through your Instagram feed and you run across an ad which is for any apparel brand which show you a catalog of 10 t-shirts.
Hi everyone, welcome to Startup Stories by Legal Pay. Today we have with us Aditya Somaiya, partner at Enzo Business Consulting. Welcome Aditya, I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, Dhruv, thank you for having me.
So if you may just tell us a bit about yourself and also then tell us what Enzo Business Consulting basically do.
Cool. So I'll just talk about Enso and hoping to cover a little bit about myself while I talk about Enso as well, right? So Enso essentially is a digital marketing agency that specializes in working with direct-to-consumer brands. And within the gamut of digital marketing, we focus on a couple of things. We primarily do growth marketing, which is also known as performance marketing, where we help brands scale their revenues either through their websites or through marketplaces. A lot of agencies are structured where they only do media buying, but for us, we do media buying and creative as well. And we started out early 2020, and it's been just about 4 years for us. And this was co-founded by me and my partner Vishay. And Vishay and I go back a long way. We started our careers together as management trainees with Dabur India Limited, and both of us have an FMCG background, so started out from there. Did a bunch of other things, and 2020 we kind of thought that, and we had a very loose thesis, right, in terms of what
Hmm.
we can do and what we can offer. So,
Right.
given a brand marketing background, I had also run a D2C brand myself for about 4.5 years, and which I had done digital, had done some consulting. So, with all our
Hmm.
experience, we thought that we'll be able to add value, and that's how we set up. And here we are. We are a team of about 30 odd people, and work with different stages of consumer brands. And other than that, we also do some project-related work, which is around brand strategy, media
Okay.
strategy evaluation, which helps
Hmm.
in venture capital fundraising, etc., etc. So much of that, but primarily performance marketing, growth marketing.
Oh, that's great. So you mentioned that you have been in and around the FMCG industry and you have extensive track record with regards to assisting the D2C brands for their growth. So what were the key difficulties and benefits that have come with collaborating with these D2C brands?
So it's a very complicated space at the moment, right? I think
Hmm.
D2C, when it started out in India, and different people have different years in which where you can actually consider the D2C actually taking off. But broadly speaking, 2018 to 2020 were the years when you saw a lot of brands kind of
Hmm.
gaining traction on the D2C space. But today, I think it's a far more competitive market, and the challenges are very different, right? I think earlier,
Right.
just the fact that consumers, you were able to give a lot of consumers access to products which they didn't have access to earlier, and convenience, where you could just sit at home and order, right? And
Right.
access, convenience, also range that you could offer. So
Hmm.
potentially, somebody going to a store and buying from there would be restricted to the inventory of that particular store itself, right? Versus essentially a far larger selection.
Hmm.
So those were the problems brands were able to solve earlier. But today, with the proliferation of brands which are available in the market, I think the challenges are different. And
Right.
classical marketing, building brand, etc., plays a far larger role versus what it used to be. So it's a tough market. I think there are certain
Hmm.
categories where there's still white spaces, but in a lot of categories there are brands at different price points, at different scales, which are all there.
Right.
And the way founders and brands need to approach their entire scaling journeys has changed significantly from then to now.
So, I mean, I think just from the one question, I've basically picked up that you have a considerable expertise and experience in the marketing industry. So, in the last 14 to 15 years, what are the transformations, either positive or negative, that you've noticed about specifically the marketing industry?
It's a very loaded question. Okay, but let me try to kind of give you a simple answer to this. Right? I think
Yeah.
I think my exposure to marketing started in 2007 when I got into a job. Right before that, it was all
Hmm.
theoretical when you do your MBA.
Right.
But I think two key themes, if you have to take out from the kind of changes which have happened, which I feel, and
Hmm.
this is purely coming from the lens of my experience. Right, you ask 10 different people, and you're going to get very different answers out of this.
Hmm.
Is number one, complete democratization, and I'll explain what I mean by democratization as well. Right, and the second
Hmm.
thing, which has also become very important, is measurement. Okay.
Okay.
Now, imagine that you were sitting back in 2010, 2011, wanting to launch a brand in any category, right? Let's assume that you wanted to launch a toothpaste brand, right? Uh, it was far more difficult to do that back then than now,
Hmm.
because on one end, you would just need a retail distribution, which
Hmm.
was very capital intensive. And on the other end, you would need to buy very expensive media, because the only way to make people aware of your brand would be through mainline media, right? You would have to buy ads on
Right.
TV, you would have to buy
Hmm.
ads on print, etc., etc., radio, those kind of
Hmm.
sources, right? So the number of brands that you saw within any category were much lesser, and you would
Right.
also see large conglomerates and multinational companies be the ones which were building consumer brands, because the investment and the startup capital which was needed was much higher, right? Uh, Today, over the course of time, democratization has fundamentally happened at three different levels. Right.
Okay.
Number one, media.
Hmm.
Anybody can start an Instagram handle, can launch a Twitter account, can run a Facebook page, all of that,
Hmm.
and it's very difficult to do so because everybody can. But having said that, you still have that option. You
Hmm.
don't have to buy expensive media for you to get started, right? So
Hmm.
that's one. Secondly, even from a manufacturing standpoint, right? I mean, this also dates back to the kind of manufacturing policies which got executed, and
Right.
multiple SEZs being developed across the country, where
Hmm.
a lot of third-party manufacturing came in.
Okay.
So for you to be able to launch a brand, you don't have to set up captive manufacturing today, right? So you can go to a third-party manufacturer, you can take your
Hmm.
formulation,
Hmm.
and you can essentially work on MOQs and get product created, right?
Right.
So you can buy media, you can get product made, and lastly, delivery, right? Last mile delivery. Today, the estimates are close to 25,000 pin codes are serviced by courier partners across the country,
Right.
and essentially, sitting anywhere, you can service pretty much most of the key markets in the country, right? So
Hmm.
manufacturing is solved for, media is solved for, and distribution is solved for, right?
Hmm.
So that entire process of democratization has essentially enabled a lot of brands to come in, and
Right.
each of these brands can find value within markets, and you can create certain sub niches. But
Hmm.
the core challenges of building large consumer brands still remain the same, right? Because essentially India is still a very retail dominated market. While some categories e-commerce has an over indexing, but
Hmm.
predominantly in most CPG categories at least,
Right.
it's still very retail heavy. So you still need to build distribution footprint.
Hmm.
But for you to get initial traction and what the startup world calls product market fit, you can do all that digitally, right? Even
Right.
marketplaces with the kind of investments people like Flipkart and Amazon have built.
Hmm.
So that's one side of this, which is the entire
Right.
democratization of the entire
Hmm.
value chain.
Hmm.
And the other side of this is measurement as well, right?
Right.
Earlier, and measurement is also linked to digital, where
Hmm.
digital by its very nature gives you a lot more metrics that you can measure.
Hmm.
But even in traditional media, I think the measurement ecosystem is significantly improved. So while for every dollar or every rupee that you spend,
Hmm.
you can get a lot more consumer insights, which means
Hmm.
that your ability to change and your ability to iterate and innovate is
Right.
much more than it what
Right.
used to be, right? As an
Right.
essentially,
Yeah.
back in the day, you would commission consumer research, you would do things like
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
for you to be able to take any sort of significant action and change parts of your marketing mix. Today, that can happen much
Right.
faster.
Right.
So I
Right.
think broadly speaking, as in these are the two core themes which I think have changed significantly.
Right.
And yeah, I think.
So now, before I ask my main question, I for our viewers and for our listeners, I want you to explain what exactly performance marketing is, so that at least when I ask my follow-up question, they're able to understand, correlate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So essentially, there are two kinds of advertising. Advertising is done for different purposes.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Uh, Typically, what people generally understand of advertising is the following: you develop a creative asset, right?
Hmm.
Which is most commonly understood creative asset is a TV ad, right?
Yeah.
That TV ad is designed for your brand, is designed to keeping certain consumers in mind, and then you buy media against it with the objective of people being aware of your brand
Right.
and considering your brand when they have to make a purchase, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the purchase doesn't happen with that ad. Purchase happens at point of sale, right? So that's classical advertising, classical marketing.
Right.
What performance marketing does differently is
Mm-hmm.
all sort of ads and campaigns which are run are in the context of D2C are run to get revenue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the source of it could be your website, could be marketplaces, could be anywhere. But the
Right.
objective is not build consideration and awareness. While without awareness and consideration, sale will not
Mm-hmm.
happen.
Mm-hmm.
But the objective or the metric that you track is revenue,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Right. Yes. Yes.
So that's the core difference between classical awareness based advertising and performance marketing. So, for example, if you're scrolling through your Instagram feed and you run across an ad which is for any apparel brand which show you a catalog of 10 t-shirts, and the bottom of it, the call to action says shop now, most likely that's a performance marketing ad, right? And the business is tracking the revenue it is generating
Mm-hmm.
for all the money it is spending to buy that media,
Right.
right? So that's broadly the difference. In the case of,
Right.
let's say, lead generation businesses like edtech, etc., right?
Mm-hmm.
The KPI changes, fintech, edtech, the KPI changes. It could
Right.
either be app download,
Mm-hmm.
or the KPI could be getting leads which a call center team would call and convert at the end of this, right?
Right.
But
Right.
all this is part of performance marketing because eventually
Mm-hmm.
it's linked to immediate revenue versus
Okay.
long term awareness advertising, which will get revenue later on while you just leave the person in the consideration set, right? And eventually the person transacts much later on.
Like, whatever, like even people are using services like cold emails or bulk WhatsApp and sending
Yes,
those those are all
yes.
performance marketing.
Not all, but yeah, some of them could be, some of them might not be as well. But you're right, as in
Mm-hmm.
uh, WhatsApp, email, all these are also channels for performance marketing.
Right. So, now since you have very nicely explained what performance marketing is, I'm sure just like Enzo, there are others agencies also which are competing with you in this very small but yet competitive and fierce market. So, how does Enzo ensure and has stood out for the other brands, and how were you able to make your way up through the existing competition?
Yep, another really good question, right? And I think what has happened over the years is
Hmm.
uh, the agency ecosystem in India has evolved significantly, right? And I think there are a lot of people doing a lot of good work. A lot of tech enablement has also happened in the ecosystem, which has really helped everybody, right? As in,
Hmm.
there are plug and play SaaS tools available across the value chain, which a lot of agencies use, a lot of brands use.
Hmm.
All of them being built in India for Indian D2C businesses,
Right,
right? So
right.
that's really helped. I think a lot of good talent has come into the D2C agency space where the overall quality of the industry has gone up, right? And while there are larger network agencies which also have their D2C arms, there are also niche boutique agencies like us at different scales
Hmm.
which are doing fabulous work, right? So I think
Right,
overall, when the ecosystem grows, everybody's capability grows, right? But
right.
fundamentally, I think the founding team of an agency essentially determines the nature of work that the agency does, right? So I'll give you an example. If the agency founders come from a media buying background, that agency generally does better in media buying. If the agency founders come from a creative background, agency does better work in creative. And that's how they are oriented, right? And that's
Hmm.
naturally where you would gravitate to. I think our just differentiation is we've just been brand owners, we've run brands, we've managed brands, and we've run businesses, right?
Right,
So
right.
the way we approach things becomes slightly different. Where for us
Hmm.
it's slightly more holistic, where business problems are addressed through performance marketing, right?
Hmm.
Versus performance marketing being an end in itself.
Right.
Essentially, what are you trying to do? You are trying to solve for growth, right?
Hmm. Right.
And performance marketing is just one lever. The
Hmm.
real value is when you can kind of step out and say that, okay, there are five other things that need to be done. So,
Right.
for example, you could also go back to a brand and say that, hey, listen,
Hmm.
there is a gap in your product portfolio. Until you come up with this portfolio, you're not going to be able to acquire consumers at the rate at which you want to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you had to put performance marketing in a very straight jacketed kind of approach, you would say that's not my job, right? As in, what product to sell, what not to sell is the brand's job. My job is, you give me a product, you tell me what it is about, and I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to create ads and buy media against it and give you
Right.
revenue, right?
Right.
But that doesn't really solve the core problem, right? The
Mm-hmm.
core problem is growth. Performance marketing is a lever, right?
Right.
So essentially, I think that's where we have been able to be slightly more participative, and I don't think we are more capable than others. It's just that our backgrounds have been different, right? I think it's just the
Right.
difference of backgrounds and the differences of experience that we kind of bring in.
Yes, maybe the
With
experience, the approach that you guys have, or the vision. I mean, that would depend from company and organization to organization.
absolutely,
Right.
absolutely, yeah. I think
So, how
that's
important, you were just speaking of levers, performance marketing being one. What is your opinion on innovation being an important lever or important screw of the entire machinery of marketing?
very important. But I think innovation also has to be looked at in the right lens, right? Innovation for the
Mm-hmm.
sake of innovation doesn't matter, but innovation when backed with relevant consumer insight
Mm-hmm.
is a very powerful tool, right? And
Mm-hmm.
innovation can be in everything, as in even minor adjustments in outer packaging of your product is also
Right.
innovation, right?
Right.
So, for
Right.
example, uh, let's look at a category which is plants, right? As in you would never think that the buying plants online would become a thing, and it's a big thing now. As in there are multiple brands which just sell plants online, right? One of the challenges which used to be that when you would ship a plant, let's say from Delhi to Bombay, half the time during courier it would just break apart, right? And brands were able to solve that through packaging,
Mm-hmm.
where the plant would reach intact,
Right.
right? So that's also innovation. But I think if you are
Mm-hmm.
genuinely solving consumer problems,
Mm-hmm.
that innovation is relevant. Innovation for the sake of
Right.
innovation doesn't get you to where, doesn't get you anywhere, right? I think that's my lens on it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think one of the core jobs of
Mm-hmm.
marketers and brands is to be able to bring new things to your consumer.
Right.
But having said that, also maintain the core ethos of the brand as well, right? As in,
Mm-hmm.
again, like I say, innovation for the sake of innovation doesn't do anything.
Right.
And a
Right.
brand is rooted in values. A brand is rooted in culture, right? And it takes time and years to build.
Right.
You
Right.
can't keep changing that every year and a half, and hope to build a brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you look at iconic brands, they all stand for something which they've stood for years.
Mm-hmm.
So certain things which don't change, which become core to business, and innovation on top of that, backed with insights, is the way I would kind of look at innovation.
Right. So, what are some of the old school techniques which you feel are always going to be relevant, and that's something every marketing professional or as person who aspires to be a marketing professional would need to keep in mind? And also, while mixing it with innovation is all well and good, but what are some key few points or metrics in your opinion that will always or are very important for a marketing professional to have?
Though I think core marketing principles, right? As in whatever you're taught in B
Hmm.
school and whatever you learn over the
Right.
first few foundational years of your marketing
Hmm.
knowledge, as in stuff around brand, stuff around positioning, stuff around segmentation, stuff around
Right.
pricing, stuff around distribution,
Right.
all these will fundamentally remain the same.
Hmm.
I think what will change is your ability to execute them, right?
Right.
So, for example, earlier it would be very hard for brands to be able to have differentiated messaging across different touch points, right?
Right.
So essentially, earlier large brands would do what? They would have a TV campaign, which would be a large campaign idea.
Hmm.
Uh, and if you were a very large brand, you would run, let's say, four different TV ads a year, right? Four, five at best. Each of
Right.
them would have a campaign. That campaign would have 360-degree execution around the same
Hmm.
thematic, right?
Hmm.
But beyond that, there was not too much opportunity, right? Today, you can you can push out unlimited content.
Right.
You can push out long format text, long format video, short format video, long
Hmm.
format text, short anything, right? And so the tools that you have changed, but they all have to talk back to brand,
Hmm.
right? They all have to talk back to consumer need. They all have to talk back to your core strat. All those things don't change. So principally, principles of marketing don't. Execution levers have.
Hmm.
So across the board, I think I would find it very hard to find one example where core principles of marketing have got disrupted
Right.
over time.
So, all right, I mean, that was a wonderful answer. Uh, Now, with regards to a query which I had, what is your thoughts and opinions on taking inspiration on campaigns which is run by other company, which eventually became a huge hit or something? Maybe it's for IPL, Dream 11, or Make 11, yeah, all those companies which try and create innovative ideas. What if someone has already made a campaign first and that becomes a huge hit, and then it's up to you, to take inspiration from that? Do you think it's a fair practice in the industry, or should everyone do their own?
So there are two parts to this, right?
Okay.
One is the ethics of this,
Right.
right? And I actually there are three parts to this. One is legality, the other is
Mm-hmm.
ethics, and the third is whether it's the right thing to do for brand or not, right? Whether it's going to give you business results. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Legality is very clear, right? India
Mm-hmm.
has laid down very clear laws. There are bodies like ASCE which are in place, which will kind of ensure that compliance to those laws is available, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the ethical side of this, I think, is a function of core values of that business and brand, right? Whether being being open to being competitive in a way which potentially either makes your competition uh, look weaker slash use their comms as springboard for other advertising, etc. I think those are
Right.
choices businesses make, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
I for one wouldn't want to comment on somebody else's ethics, right? As in to each their own.
Mm-hmm.
But the real question to ask is, does it do anything for your business and for your consumer, right? And in
Right.
most of the times, the answer is that it really doesn't. There are examples where it's got
Mm-hmm.
executed brilliantly,
Right.
right? Where you've taken another brand, you've taken inspiration for a brand, and you've done things which have significantly changed, right? So the classic example is the Avis versus Hertz, right?
Yes.
Where they used to say that we are the second largest, but we serve you better. I think I don't remember I'm paraphrasing. I don't
I
remember the
think some
exact.
similar, there was
Yeah,
some content also with regards to Zomato and Swiggy and all of those three, four
yeah,
boards back to back, and they were all using their own strategy. If they don't serve
yeah.
you,
But
we
the
will, or
but the
something
thing
like that.
is, yeah. So yeah, absolutely right. So one of
Yes.
these things where the tomatoes with these boards on the road, these
Yes,
road signs,
yes,
right?
yes, yes.
Uh, and there were I saw 100 of these kind of posts on Instagram
Hmm.
after that became a big thing.
Right.
But did it do anything meaningful for the brand? Maybe it was just a social media post. Did it really? I don't know. I have my doubts, right? I think because
Yes, who came out to be on top at the end of the day? I mean, using similar
yeah, as in,
strategy.
and if your
Yes,
inspiration is a good thing, right? And there are two
yes.
opinions to this, right? I think
Hmm.
all form of creativity is plagiarism at some level, right?
Yes.
Because there's nothing new which is not got created. That's one way to look at it. But taking inspiration is fine, but replicating, copying campaigns, I don't think there is value for it for the brand itself. You might as well do something else, as in use that same time and effort to do something else
Hmm.
versus do this, right? As in, I personally don't believe in that school of marketing.
Hmm.
So that's where I am on it.
All right, that's great. Now I'm going to switch up the question in between. Now it's going to be primarily about you and your organization and your management skills primarily.
I
So
don't have
now,
any management skills, man. As in-
so anyway, I mean, there's a ever evolving landscape, marketing
yeah,
or be it legal or being film industry, everyone has their own set of challenges, and everyone
yeah.
has a certain level of adaptability and continuous learning that comes as and when we, day by day learning and as and when we grow. So how do you, you know, cultivate a culture of adaptability and continuous learning within the organization and your team?
Yeah, so I think one of the things which is a great thing about smaller teams, right, is
Hmm.
that with smaller teams, you don't have the ability to or the option to take a backseat and to hide behind anybody else, right? As in, I think because
Right.
with smaller
Accountability is
teams,
more. Accountability is
accountability
more.
is more, right?
Yes.
And when accountability is high, you
Hmm.
are constantly pushed towards learning because you
True.
most of the time you are
True.
punching above your weight, right?
Hmm.
And you have to learn and adapt to get there. I think uh, what we as business leaders have to do is to enable people to get there, right? So
Hmm.
and enablement is at different levels. There is certain technical enablement, right, where
Right.
certain upskilling is required.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have to be the ones saying that, hey, listen, if you feel that, as people in the team, right, if you feel that you require a certain skill set which you
Mm-hmm.
don't have, which will help you do better,
Mm-hmm.
here is a course, take it, do it, move on, right? As in, and pick up that skill, go ahead. But the other side of this is just the belief that you instill in team, saying there is this problem, you got to solve the problem and tell
Mm-hmm.
us what you need for us to do, right? As in, we are going to be standing and supporting and mentoring, guiding, and solving that problem. But the problem is yours to solve.
Yes, in
Because if
the end,
you don't,
yes,
yeah, because
people
if
can
you
tell,
don't
but
solve,
we have to do it, right?
yeah, because if you don't solve it, you
Mm-hmm.
don't develop the skills to approach a problem. You might not
Right,
encounter the same problem again later on.
right.
But what you need to build is the ability, right? When you face a problem, what are the kind of questions to ask? Where do I go and look for solutions,
Mm-hmm.
right? And those can only be learned when you let people try. People will
Mm-hmm.
make mistakes, right? And that's fine,
True. Yes,
right?
yes.
So the way we say things is that you make blunders, make big mistakes, but don't make silly mistakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we keep telling our team. And by silly mistakes, I mean that
Right.
thought through approach can lead to a bad result. That's fine.
Mm-hmm. True.
Oversight and doing something, and or not doing something,
Mm-hmm.
that's something which is a problem,
Yeah.
right? So it's fine. As in, I might have thought that the answer to this question is the following, and I might be wrong about it. That's completely acceptable, right?
Mm-hmm.
As long as it's a thought through process, right? So that's what we try enabling within our team.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, I think we'll also keep getting better and better as we go along.
That's great. So now I want to ask a question. I mean, now with that AI is on the rise, and we were talking about innovation, how
Mm.
important do you feel AI would be down the line in the marketing industry, or would it primarily be a easy way out for marketing professionals just to give some inputs and have a design ready or something like that?
All of
Hmm.
our jobs, as we
Right,
see them today,
right.
will cease to exist in the near future.
Hmm.
And I've said this many times, and people kind of come back and say that, what do you mean by that, right? I think
Hmm.
fundamentally, AI is going to change everything.
Right.
It's not a question of whether it will happen, it's just a question of when,
When? Right.
right? And I'm sure in the legal world as well, you're also finding a lot of use cases around AI which are coming in, and they are also fundamentally changing a lot of the work that you do, right? I think in our case,
Yes,
uh,
at least administration side, writing emails and all those things, and helping with contracts in the language is comparatively getting easier with the
yeah,
help of AI and
yeah,
everything.
all that you're seeing today,
Right.
but extrapolate this 2 3 years later. And the best way to see
Hmm.
this is that if you roll back 6 months
Right.
and think 6 months back, when and for a lot of people, the first time they had real access to AI was through Chat GPT, right?
Right.
Uh,
Yes. Yes.
from there to now, the significant changes which have happened.
There's a lot of AIs have come up. Google has its own. Bing has its own.
And forget a lot of them. Just
Hmm.
the ability that they have today versus 6 months back is significantly
Is
different, right?
very different. Very
Uh,
different.
in the long run, I think fundamentally the way marketing teams, agencies are structured
Hmm.
are going to dramatically change, right?
Right.
If you don't have a very solid strategy which is deeply incorporated AI in your way of working,
Hmm.
somebody else will come and do it, and you'll just go out of business. It's as simple as that, as far as our industry is concerned, right?
So there's no way of coexisting for AI and marketing to coexist.
No, it will be, but I think
Hmm.
like for the same job, right? What the
Hmm.
number of people that you need uh, will change dramatically, right? See,
True.
agency businesses are essentially people businesses, right?
Yes.
The
Yes.
size of the agency is directly proportional to how many people the agency employs, right?
Hmm.
All that is just going to change, right? So
Right.
essentially,
So
a bunch
AI
of
would allow anyone to do anything. I mean, if a person wanting
yeah,
to do an ad, he'll just give some input and he like the idea and he'll give, put across. He might not need to hire an agency or a professional to do all of
no,
those things. If he just,
you still need people to think,
right.
right? You
But
still need people
yeah.
to strategize. Actually, if you
Hmm.
technically think about it, in the long run, you don't even need people to think and strategize, which is
Yes.
what also will be done by AI, right?
Yeah. You can
Uh,
just ask them, like, what's your take? Like, should we do this? Should
yeah,
we do that?
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So one of the thesis that I have, and which is uh, which is going to take a while. I think eventually what is going to happen is there's going to be 90% corporate taxation.
Right.
Everybody is going to be on universal basic income, and few companies are just going to run the world, and we are just going to
Right.
get money by governments to consume, right?
Right.
Because I
Right.
can't foresee anything that anybody does,
Hmm.
uh, which and AI meaning just one. AI is just a loosely used term
Yes.
for the entire world of technology and machine
Exactly.
learning, etc.
Yes. The deep
That
web.
it cannot
Yes.
do, right? And eventually, all this is just going to change fundamentally. So I have a
Right.
very like polarized view on
Hmm.
this, and
No, that's fair. I mean, we all know, but we just, I think we can say we are ignorant towards the fact that we are using AI and we are just helping them advance.
yeah,
And I think in a result, we are losing our essential skills because for a lawyer, if like more than anything, they have their own words, they have their drafting skills and research skills and all those things. And if the AI is able to do all that, then I don't think people would need to hire associates and then promote them up the ladder and all those things. If just be the
yeah,
one person with two or three people, and then they'll be able to do it all.
yeah, yeah.
So now, like since we are on the thought process line, what we frequently notice that there's a different approach towards a B2B company and marketing for a B2C company.
Hmm.
And B2C brands are often perceived as more successful in their marketing endeavors compared to B2B brands. What are your thoughts on this?
No, I don't think it's the case. I don't. It's not about success. I think
Hmm.
because you engage with the B2C brands a lot more,
Hmm.
they are more in your face. You see them on TV. You see them on multiple places,
Right,
and hence you feel that they are more successful. But there have been very large B2B businesses which have got built, right?
right.
And the approach to marketing is different.
Hmm.
I think a lot of people just find B2B marketing boring.
Yes,
uh, it's also a function of, and there's a friend of mine who keeps saying this, right? As in, there is no B2B, there's no B2C.
right.
It's people buying products and services and people selling products and services, right? So the
Hmm.
moment, and there are few brands which have do this better than others, where if you just use people as the benchmark and
Right.
start creating content and advertising for people, it just changes language and tonality, right?
Hmm.
As in, everything doesn't have to be strategically aligned, transforming this, transforming that, these large buzzwords which you'll find in the B2B marketing space.
Right.
I think there's a lot of simplification which can happen. There's a lot of connect which can get built. But no, B2B marketing is very effective, man. As in, it's not like it's not been effective. As in, there have been very large brands which have got built.
Right, right. I think B2C is comparatively more easier because there's a very, very big market when it comes to B2C. I mean, if someone is
Yeah.
selling food or Zomato, I mean, every consumer would want to have that ease of access.
Yeah,
Zomato
plus
to
we
get,
understand it easier
yes,
as well, right? As in,
right,
for me to relate to Coca-Cola is much easier than for me
right,
to, I don't know, relate to Nvidia or or even Infosys for that matter, right? As in, for me
right.
to understand what
Hmm.
Infosys does is more difficult to imagine in my head. It's easier for me to just understand Coke, right? As in, it's just a bottle
Hmm.
like you drink as a beverage. As in,
Hmm.
it's more easy to understand, and hence I think there is also this perception that B2B marketing is not that successful, but it's
Right.
not the case clearly.
So now, like since we were using the Coca-Cola example, do you
Hmm.
think, I mean, the public or the consumer nowadays are more inclined towards a short informative video compared to a long informative video? Because sometimes a person might not be inclined because until unless it's of their interest. If someone like me, an advocate or someone is watching
Hmm.
a video of a case brief or something, they'll prefer like it to be they'll be okay for 10 minutes or something. But ideally, normally, even trailers and teasers are just prime example of marketing
Yeah.
only. And nowadays, people, do you think that the as we are progressing and we are moving forward, the marketing is getting challenging to the effect that you now have or you want to have a shorter span in grabbing the attention of the consumer,
But that's always been the case, right? TV ads traditionally were 30 seconds, right?
right?
Nobody really cares, right? As in, nobody cares about your brand more than uh, that time period. I think that's not changed.
Right,
Uh, People care about things they care about. You can, if you are
right,
interested in MMA, you will sit and watch a 3 hour podcast by Joe Rogan,
right.
right? But within that podcast, if you are not on the paid YouTube subscription or now
Yeah,
Spotify, you'll just press skip every time you see an ad, right? Because you
right,
don't really
right.
care.
Yes.
right? As
And
in
people are
we
still
as
using YouTube despite having so many
yeah,
ads. People still use YouTube
yeah,
because they
because
want to.
you are
Yeah,
using YouTube to watch content. You're not there to watch
right.
ads, right? As in
Exactly.
brand owners care more about their brand, and they think their brands matter more in the real world than consumers do. And I think that's a humility a lot of brand owners should
Hmm.
have. And over time, you realize that, right? As in, like for you, your brand is the most important thing. For a consumer, it's a very tiny fraction of their lives,
Right, right.
right? And the same thing is true with content. As in, for them, content is what interests them.
Hmm.
So that's not changed. I think short format content has always been the case. As in, it's always been advertising has to be like crisp. Advertising always has to be short, and that still
Right.
continues to be the case.
Maybe the way of portraying that short
That has changed.
advert
Agreed.
is different. Yes, I mean it
Agreed.
changes
That has
every
changed.
now and then.
Yeah, it's an Instagram.
Earlier,
It's an
yeah,
Instagram reel versus a TV ad, right? As in
right.
that's the
Because
difference.
now with the rise of social media, I mean, so many
Yeah,
influencers, the influencer culture has come up, which was not
yeah,
there. I mean, if you just look at like 4 or 5 years ago, people were making vines or they were using other platforms to,
yeah,
build their followers and everything. But
yeah,
with the rise of reels and everything, the content that people create, some are getting very creative, some are going the wrong direction. But I think that's part and
yeah.
parcel of learning. Uh,
Absolutely.
so now keeping that in mind, I mean, marketing is a sphere where you have to take learnings from your past work or campaigns, and how do you think that the brands can enhance their utilization of data and analytics to better personalize the customer experience or provide the better marketing performance?
It's very difficult, right? As in, so you have to be able to differentiate between analytics, performance, and insight. Right?
Hmm.
Data will be able to put together certain hypotheses. Right. So,
Hmm.
let's take a very basic example. You look at your sales data, and
Right.
you say that for some reason Bangalore seems to be getting 40% of my revenue,
Hmm.
while Delhi and Bombay are only 20%. Right now, one way to treat that data is to say that, hey, listen, okay, I know this. Let
Hmm.
me increase my media spends more in Bangalore versus the other markets to maximize, right? I think
Right.
what that still doesn't answer is why.
Yes, I mean, why the people in Delhi are not responding to the
Yeah.
ad?
So I think
Right.
the real challenge is that there is a lot of data which is available,
Hmm.
which helps you create certain hypotheses, right, around what potentially could be happening. It
Hmm.
could be just the case that your communication works better in certain markets versus not. It could be just that you've bought better media there or whatever. There could be five different hypotheses, right? But stage two is where real outcomes come from, where you start questioning these things, right? As in, for example, very simple thing for a early stage brand would be to pick up a call and talk to 10 consumers from Bangalore, right? And just understand who these people are. Why are they buying? As in, what about, because you are not creating an ad meant for a person sitting in Bangalore, right? And I'm just using geography as a proxy for consumer segment.
Right.
You're not creating an ad for that person, but there's some reason why they're buying more than the others,
Hmm.
right? So the real answers stem there. I think that is where analytics is solved for, right? As in,
So, what are the key metrics that you use? I mean, personally, if you have to give two or
yeah,
three key
again
metrics,
depends, right? As in depends on what,
the
where.
type of ad.
So yeah, so what type of ad, type of platform, what you're looking at,
Hmm.
business, you're looking at campaign. So for example, today, if you're running video ads on social, I think hook rates and hold rates are important metrics, right? Click through rates are important metrics for
Right.
advertising per se, right?
Hmm.
If you're looking at performance, then media buying CPMs are important because that's cost of media. Conversion rates, because eventually that becomes the resultant outcome on a website. So metrics are different, and metrics are a function of the business that you are trying to understand, as in what part of the business, and
Right.
more importantly, there are sources to create certain hypotheses, right, as to what is
Hmm.
working, what is not working, and the
Hmm.
real value is those hypotheses and not really the metric.
Right.
Yeah,
So, like, I have one question. You founded your own startup. You mentioned that in your introduction,
mm.
and that was primarily in the sports retail segment, if I'm not
Yeah,
wrong, sports and
yep.
fitness category. So, how was your entrepreneurial journey, and what was the learning that or basically what the lessons you took from there and brought to Enzo?
Very very difficult journey. I think
Hmm.
especially coming from our from the background I came from, right? I think
Hmm.
the support systems that you have in a large multinational when you work are very, very undervalued.
Right.
And
You're a
versus when
disposable person to them.
no, and no more than that, for anything that you need to do or get executed on your brand, the
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure that you have around you, right?
Right.
Uh, you take that for granted, right? So, for example, if I had to change packaging on my brand,
Mm-hmm.
there was a team dedicated who would help design new packaging, right?
Right.
While as an entrepreneur, the first thing is that everything that has to be done by you, right? When you're in the early
Yes.
stage of that, so
You
that
have to lay the
mental shift,
groundwork.
yeah. So essentially, early on in the days, we were packing orders ourselves because, as in, if we had one person to help us pack orders, and if
Right.
that person was on leave, orders had to get dispatched, and we would sit in the morning and pack orders, right? And that's the story of
Mm-hmm.
you'll find across a lot of D2C founders, and but that's just
Yes.
reality,
Yes.
right?
That's just how it
And
is.
and,
Right.
and suddenly those are times when you start questioning life decisions, right? I left a
Mm-hmm.
corporate job and I'm sitting here and packing stuff.
Right.
Suddenly the entire this whole perception of
I think that's part of the
startups,
startup culture.
yeah, it just
Right.
changes, right? As in, I think though
Yes.
that journey is also tough,
I
but
think,
I
but
think
that
this.
gives you more learning. I mean, I believe because when you get your hands actually, into the business, when you understand what actually goes, what happens, how packaging and everything is done, and all of those things, you
Bro,
eventually
I think
learn
the
more.
only learning actually is humility, right? As in,
Exactly.
packing orders is not going to make you better at running a brand,
Yes.
but it's that learning in humility, which is that there's a lot more work that needs to be done, and you have to
Hmm.
do a lot more work. I think is the core value, right? I think,
Right.
and that happens at various stages, right? The kind
Hmm.
of budgets that you have available to you,
Hmm.
right? So multiple things change there, but. I think what has happened with that is we've become more cognizant and more empathetic towards uh, early stage founders, right? As in, because
Hmm.
we've gone through that grind ourselves,
Right.
we understand the challenges a little better.
Right. Right.
Not having cash in the bank
Hmm.
uh, at the end of the month is reality,
Right.
right? Because you have receivables which are going to accrue over a period of time, but today
Hmm.
you don't.
Right.
And managing cash flow and managing growth, all of these, right,
Hmm.
are very real problems,
Right.
right? Those are things as from a distance
Hmm.
you don't appreciate,
Right.
but when you go through those cycles, you understand how real the problem is.
Hmm.
So I think a bunch of things, I think, which have kind of made us, which have so aligning our ways of working with founders for us became easier because we've gone through that process ourselves, right? As in, so that I think has been the real value.
I think when a person takes a startup journey, you
Yeah,
get to know the end-to-end process. You're not just doing
yeah,
a
yeah,
one-dimensional job. You're not like a
yeah.
racehorse who's just, racing in one direction. Now you
Correct.
know everything. No other person will come in and can tell you that this is how it's supposed to be done because you know
Yeah,
actually how it's supposed to be done.
yeah, yeah,
So now on to my final question. I think this would, as a marketing professional, you'll appreciate and can be a stroke of genius. So the question basically is, I mean, in the marketing sphere and in your business specifically, I mean, you all deal inevitably with a lot of legal challenges, which are,
yeah.
contractual disputes, copyrights, or, payment disputes.
Mhm.
And dealing with such litigation does get very hefty and, requires a substantial investment. So how does Enzo navigate and addresses these situations?
I think for a long period of time we didn't have a real answer, right? As in, we were also
Hmm.
struggling with these kind of questions, and
Right.
uh, when you are trying to build a business, there are certain things which you focus on, and there are certain things which remain activities which are not core to
Hmm.
your business, right? And for those activities, you don't deploy the right thought, the right resources
Right.
till the time a real need arises, right? And
Hmm.
like, for example, a payment disputes is a classic example, right?
Right. Right.
Till the time you look at your balance sheet at the end of the year and you realize that, hey, there is like X amount of lakhs sitting in receivables, which don't seem to be coming your way. That's when it really hits
Right.
you that your cash flow is
Yes.
significantly getting impacted, right?
Exactly. Right.
And I think for us, like guys like you and guys like the kind of work that you guys do at Legal Pay, and I'm not saying this just because we're on the podcast, right?
That was a
Is
stroke of marketing genius.
is real is real value, right?
Right. Right.
I don't know how to navigate this. I can't solve this problem,
You
right?
can't focus on your business if you do.
No, but plus I don't even have the skill set.
Right. Right.
right? Number one, I don't have the skill set. Number two, I don't have the
Mm-hmm.
bandwidth, right?
Right.
And if I can work with companies like yours,
Mm-hmm.
uh, where there is an element of trust, where there is an element of ownership, right? As in the way the
Right.
kind of model that you guys work,
Mm-hmm.
you are also vested in our success, right? As in solving
Exactly.
our litigation problems. That gives me the confidence that, hey, listen, I have given this to people who seem to know what they're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are vested in my success, and hence I can kind of sit back and say that this will get managed, right?
Right. Right.
And that is why the relationship is it works, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those two, and especially in areas
Right.
where I have no competence.
It's a symbiotic relationship. I mean,
Yeah, I think that's how it works.
all right. I mean, thank you, Aditya. Thank you for coming to the podcast. And it was actually a wonderful having a discussion. I somehow became very interested in marketing. I'll probably look it up.
You guys need to keep easier questions for people who come on podcasts, and don't make people think so much, man. I mean, this is just like you guys get very technical with this, but that's why it's good fun as well. And I hope that
Yes.
people who see this will find some value as well, because
Yes,
you
yes.
get into detail as well.
I did being from
Yeah,
a law background, but I still actually
yeah,
because
yeah,
marketing is something which is inherent, which people do subconsciously, if you like,
yeah,
they'll agree it or not. But people posting on LinkedIn and all those things, they're all part of your promotional activities. It's just you should know how to do it. It's all marketing at the end of the day. You are telling people that these are the things I've done. This is the publication I've done. All those things. That's all vocal or written publication that you are or marketing that you're doing. So, I mean, I thank you. Thank you once again. I did personally learn a lot, and it was wonderful having you. It was worth the wait.
great, great. Thanks. Take care.
All right.